Hello everyone again. Fiona and I have Gordon MacIntyre-Kemp here with us as a guest. Great to have you. You've been on the podcast a few times already, Gordon, but thanks very much for coming on again. We're going to be talking to Gordon about the Scottish Citizens Convention proposal that has come out of Believe in Scotland. Where has the idea emerged from? What the thinking is behind it?
Well, basically, the idea is that we are faced with a logjam. There are constitutional roadblocks in our way as a movement, and we've got to figure out a way past them. And so what we wanted to do was to put together a proposal that says, look, and it is a proposal, it's there for discussion, and it's there for people to add ideas to improve, or indeed, and as somebody said to me the other day, it's quite long and complicated and difficult to understand. Well, yes, it's a process about changing the constitutional future of a nation. It probably should be. But I'll tell you what, if someone can come up with a simple, easy to understand and deliverable, cheap route to independence, I'm all ears. It's just I don't think there is one. So basically, we've put the Citizens' Convention idea forward as a way to get rid of the constitutional roadblocks. This is not a Believe in Scotland convention or an independence convention or even a constitutional convention. We want the Scottish government to say, right, we're at a crossroads. We think the UK is failing. We want to understand the hopes and dreams and aspirations of the Scottish people. We want them to tell us what matters to them, what their values are, how they would like to see Scotland run differently to how it is currently, to how the UK is run currently. And then after we've captured those hopes and dreams and aspirations for a better Scotland of the Scottish people, the convention would say, right, who can deliver against this? This is our national mission. This is what the people want. Who can deliver against this? And then Westminster, can you deliver against this? No. Holyrood, can you deliver against this? No, we don't have the powers. Okay, the answer must be the Scottish people want independence then. So basically what we're doing is we're challenging the union to show how, if we planned the best possible future for Scotland in partnership with the Scottish people, if we then said, this is what the Scottish people want, how do we deliver it? I believe the only way to deliver what the Scottish people really want is through independence, and I believe a national conversation on this scale will prove that, and we can call out the unionists, we can call out the Westminster government and say, right, here it is, you prove that we're not disadvantaged by being part of the union. And so that's basically what we're saying. Let's call them out. Let's challenge the union, because someone's got to, because right now it's just not happening. In the last general election, the union was not being challenged, and that's why the lead political party of the independence movement did so badly, because it wasn't convincing, it wasn't on independence, and it wasn't challenging the status quo at all. So basically, we see this as a way to unlock a new path to independence.
You know, reading through the proposal, there's mention of trustees. So, you know, how would that work? Fiona and I have had a conversation with Leanne Wood about the Welsh Constitutional Commission, which is similar but also different. They had, you know, a couple of people who were kind of co-chairs of the commission, and then there were commissioners underneath that. Leanne Wood herself was one of them. It wasn't just about Wales becoming independent, of course. It was just looking at options for Wales. So have you got as far as thinking how it might be structured and how it might work?
So I don't want to be too prescriptive about this, because it's not a Believe in Scotland project. So what we're actually saying is the general principle is we need a new national conversation. Now, if you look back at 2014, I don't believe that political parties moved the polls from started at 27 to up to 45. I believe it was the grassroots Yes movement. I believe it was the conversations that were taking place in pubs, New Year's Eve parties that were taking place in the streets, street stalls, etc. Women for Independence coffee mornings, national collective events, these sort of things, Business for Scotland events. You know, everyone talking to their peers about what they wanted, how they wanted a better Scotland. No one was saying, and you must vote for this particular politician, etc. So the time that we saw the biggest increase in independent support was during a national conversation. And therefore we want to repeat that. We want to take the politics out of it and put it to one side. This isn't anti-politics, as someone said. I think it was Tommy Shepherd said, this is anti-politics. It's not. We need a three-pronged approach. One is national conversation about the hopes and dreams of the Scottish people so as we understand what it is they want. We need a strong political arm of the campaign, and we need a strong grassroots movement as well. So it's actually putting in place the three elements that I think we need to get from where we are to independence. In terms of how it will be managed, well, if the Scottish government is going to vote for it and going to design it, etc., yeah, they will have a large say in how it's managed. But the way I see it being managed is as an arm's length organisation from the Scottish government that's independent of the Scottish government and that has a group of trustees. I'm not going to start naming names, etc. I've got a few people in mind that I think would be that, but it's not a Believe in Scotland are going to run a convention and asking for £2.5 million, £3 million, right? What we're saying is that the important thing is that we actually try and figure out what is the answer to the question, what sort of Scotland do we really want to live in?
Yeah.
And then, as a second stage, okay, who could deliver that type of Scotland? And I can guarantee you it can't be delivered without the powers of independence. But if you say that means that the unionists won't take part because you believe that, well, surely they believe that it can, otherwise they wouldn't be unionists.
What we found quite tricky at first is to keep standing back and say, no, let's just focus on the conversation that's got to be an open conversation without any predetermined outcomes. I mean, We're assuming we know what they're going to be, but who knows? I think that's the first trick, really, or the first difficult thing you're going to have to establish is the credibility and the integrity of that process, in that it's not run by Believe in Scotland, it's not run by the Yes Movement, it's not run by the Scottish government. I think arm's length is absolutely the right way to do it. But then that starts bringing in timescale, because a small focused organisation, I mean, look how quickly you got that paper out. It was incredibly quickly. That's how agile your organisation is. That is not how the government works. I mean, Holyrood's in recess just now. So the very idea that it could be up and running by September, I think you said, that's a huge challenge.
I think that yes, I think it is realistic, it is doable. But it's a very good point. But that's also why I don't think the government should actually run it. That's why I think it needs to be an independent organisation. Because yes, if the civil servants are asked to run this, then it won't even start until 2028. That is the problem. I think it is deliverable. It's all about the political will to make it happen. And starting it and the main body of the work are two different things. It can be launched in September. But it was not going to really start fully working until later in the year. So it's next year. It's the whole of next year that it would be fully operational. What
can be launched in September then?
It can be announced that it's happening and that it's going to be funded, and that we are beginning the work of putting it together and the planning process. But I have done a whole load of work on how it would work, what the processes would be. A systems thinking approach as to actually changing the mindset of the population, combined with how we would do polling with multi-level regression to actually as a starting point to take the temperature of the nation, how we'd poll throughout it, how we would release papers at certain times, and how we would then approach international governments and other bodies, etc., and actually ask them to give us global best practices that we can throw into the mix that the Scottish people can then discuss. All of that is done. None of that was in the report because it was already 50 pages, and people who are talking about it haven't read it quite clearly, haven't read the whole thing because they're getting it wrong. So we can take that and we can give it to the Scottish government, and we can say, look, we think this is how it will work. These are the facilitation skills you need. These are the research skills you need. These are how many people we think you need. All of that is done. Okay. And actually that's what the devolution, what the Constitutional Convention that came to conclusion that Scotland should have a devolved parliament in the 90s. What it did was it actually wrote the blueprint as to how to actually set up the government. So we have also written the blueprint as to how to make this work.
That word "we," though, that's going to be critical as to, again, the integrity or the credibility of the process. Because if we, as in the Yes Movement, are designing something, then it's not being designed as an open conversation that's not...
No, we are. We're designing it exactly as that. It doesn't matter. So Believe in Scotland is a collaborative network of 142 Yes groups, ranging from Inverness to the borders and from both sides of the country as well. And it includes Pensioners for Independence.
Yeah.
It includes Yes for EU, all these sorts of. That's what I mean when I say we. We've been working on this. We have something called the Scottish Independence Congress, which we launched in 2019. It's had hundreds of people attending meetings where we've been discussing how do we do this. So they said, we want you to lead a Scottish Independence Convention. And we said, okay, let's look into that. We looked into it and we realised that a Scottish Independence Convention was not necessarily going to work because, well, for a start, I spoke to, I'm not going to say who I have spoken to, but we did a target list of all of the big civic organisations that you would expect to take part. And they all said, we like this, we like where you're going with this, but if it's an independence convention, it's political, we're not joining.
Exactly. Right. And that is the position that you're going to have to achieve. But thinking the context that we all operate in with an extremely hostile media, and even Tommy Shepherd, who's a good guy, he's on the right side, and yet he immediately responded to something that wasn't even in, he was responding to his fears about what was going to be in the paper, and half of it wasn't actually in there. So it's that sort of, how do we manage I'm using the we word, how do we manage the context so that somebody from the outside is not immediately put off and can wave your paper and say, this is an independence, it's a Trojan horse. How do we get to that stage?
Well, basically, if unionists are saying that this process, which is a national conversation about the hopes and dreams of the Scottish people, identifying that is all about independence, then they're actually saying the hopes and dreams of the Scottish people can only be delivered through independence.
Yeah.
So, if I were, that's self-defeating straight away. We've won. That's it. We've won. We can give up. We can just go home now. We've got independence because
so what they might say.
What they're going to say is, they will say that. They will say that. They will attack. You know what? Because every morning I get out of bed and I say to myself, I wonder how many people are going to say things that are untrue about what I have done, written, said, etc. How many people are going to attack what we're doing, misrepresent who we are, etc. And I just go, I don't care because that's life. So yes, they're going to, but let's not catastrophize what's going to happen here, because if it's funded by the Scottish government, then it's funded by the same people who put out GERS. So if they go, this is completely biased, how come they accept GERS as the Bible truth? So they're going to have to sort that out themselves. But this is a challenge. This is a challenge to the unionists to say, okay, how does your system of governance for Scotland deliver the hopes and dreams of the Scottish people? Because nobody knows what they are right now. Nobody knows what their values are. We've never had an exercise of this size, of this ambition.
Yeah, indeed. And I mean, I must remember that point about GERS. If I find myself I'm being asked that's a really good one. Some MSPs might say, even independents voting one. Look, we've had a citizens' assembly and the remit was to think about a future for Scotland. And they came up with, there's a report from it, and we have that report. And in fact, I'd forgotten about that assembly, but Fiona,
there's the
Fiona
key point
hadn't.
Right there. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Fiona hadn't. She found the remit and she found some of the conclusions from it. Actually, it was quite difficult, as I remember, Fiona.
It was very difficult.
It wasn't an obvious thing to find. So I had a look at what was in it, and I looked at the conclusions and I thought, wow, well, you wouldn't argue with any of that. I mean, it was very
bland.
Let's be a bit fairer and say it was very principial. It wasn't anything that was a surprise in it. In fact, I started off thinking, well, you could sit around a table with half a dozen people and come up with those things on the back of the table napkin. But what it doesn't have, what you don't hear is you don't hear the voices of Scotland. You don't hear what it's like to be Scottish, living in Scotland. Whereas if you take a group of, let's call them commissioners, I don't know what we'll call them, trustees, land up in, I don't know, Auchtermuchty, Stornoway, and they hire a hall, or probably the church hall, and they say in advance, come and have coffee and tea, and there'll be whatever scone, sausage rolls, all the things that we Scots like, and come and tell us, what is it like to live in Stornoway? What do you like about it? What's the communities like? What does the community value? What's hard? What do you need more of or less of? That's what I can get excited about when I read
I'm going to make you an ambassador for this proposal, because that's
fine, that's okay.
That's exactly what I mean when I say a national conversation. I don't mean a throwaway term. I mean, let's actually get down into the nitty gritty of it and actually find out what it is to be Scottish and what it is to live in your community, what your issues are. So the independence movement as a whole is highly political. And as I say, this is not anti-politics. Politics has its place, but what we're missing is this conversation. What we're missing is the Scottish cultural elements of why we want to do this. Because, and I've done studies of every independence movement that I can find that can be even remotely compared to Scotland. I've looked at how the campaigns that actually broke the Soviet Union up, etc. And I've looked at how people campaigned in different areas and what happened, etc. And what I can't find is politicians and government ministers leading anything. What I can't find is people getting excited about policies. What I can't find is anything other than cultural figures and trade unionists and choirs and playwrights leading everything. And it strikes me as interesting that our entire movement is based on political parties, and there's even a fight between political parties as to who controls the movement.
Yeah. But it didn't start off that way, did it? I mean, in 2014, it was that whole joyful, out of control culture was a huge part. Yes.
I mean, no, absolutely, that is the fact. In 2014, or the run up to 2014, yes, Scotland was founded. I don't particularly think that was a good organisation or run particularly well. I thought the campaign wasted a lot of money. But what worked was the local yes groups. There was a grassroots campaign that just couldn't be matched, even though they had more money. The unionists couldn't match that, and so that to me was what worked. That it wasn't political, even though there were political figures, and that is absolutely right. But there was a strong political base, because obviously there were a majority, and there was a strong grassroots base, and there was a national conversation going on. That's the three-pronged approach that I'm trying to put back in place, because that's what makes the difference. I personally am not a supporter of any political party. I have been a member of the SNP in the past, because the SNP used to be the movement. But as soon as they got the majority and there was a referendum, like you say, it stopped being about politics, and you didn't need to be a member of the SNP to support independence. You could join Women for Independence, you could join NHS for Yes, National Collective, Business for Scotland, etc. But as soon as the referendum was over, Yes Scotland was shut down, and everybody joined the SNP. But the SNP didn't understand that it was no longer a political party, that it was a movement. And now we know where we are in terms of all the infighting, because it wasn't run as a movement, and that is the issue. So we need to run it as a movement, and the political parties are battling for control over the Yes movement. The issue is, and this is where Believe in Scotland comes in, is we don't lead it; it leads us. We're the servant of the Yes movement. It's the only way to run a movement, is to put yourself at its service and see how it goes. You can't actually stand up and say, we're in charge. There's been a couple of organisations that have stood up and said, we're the umbrella organisation. Guess what's happened to them? They've failed. We say, what do you want us to do? They tell us, we do it. We put ourselves at the bottom of the pyramid as opposed to the top. And that's why we've managed to be successful to this point.
There's that statement about, political parties don't create waves. They ride the wave. And SNP has obviously been riding the wave that it was created in the run-up.
You could say in the past the SNP created that wave. No SNP, no referendum, probably no Scottish Parliament, right? The Scottish Parliament was set up to kill independence stone dead. Why? Because the SNP were a pain in the neck. So there was a point when the SNP were the movement, and I totally and utterly credit them with that. But the world's changed. Scotland has changed. We've moved on. It can't just be about politics. We've now got independence to the point where it's not just about politics, where it is actually about running the country and being a movement. Whereas before devolution, the SNP was a movement, and therefore everyone could be part of it. And that's why it's such a broad church, and it's the broad church element that made it so successful. And it's the broad church element that's now causing problems.
We're going to do a series of podcasts around national conversations. Because Ireland's having one, Wales has just had one, we're about to have one. The only bit that's not having one, as far as I can see, is England. But the Irish one, there was a very interesting series of podcasts called Shared Ireland. And they were talking with people on opposing sides. And the very first question they asked was, what has to happen for you to feel happy taking part in this conversation? And I thought that is actually a really good starting point. Is this something that perhaps has to be done by the trustees, or how do you see that working?
So basically, that the whole idea of what needs to happen in order for all sides to be willing to take part is the core design principle of what we've proposed, right?
Right.
So we've done it for that reason, because initially we wanted, just like everybody else wanted, was an independence convention. We were going to, but we realized it didn't work. So we suggested a route to independence last year, which was published in the first page of the National, I believe, in Scotland, and it genuinely involved hundreds of local yes groups, and we have a 33 strong elected national campaign steering group who worked on this, and other people worked on it as well, not me. In fact, I would say I'm only 50% responsible for the most recent proposal, for the Citizens' Convention proposal. And we worked on it, and we came up with this plan for a de facto referendum at general election this year, and it involved a independence convention. So we've been working on this for a long time. That was since I think about February last year, and we published that, but it wasn't implemented and it wasn't brought forward. There was an element in the general election of there will be independence page 1, etc., because that was mandated by SNP conference, so it had to be there. There was no way not to put that there. And then they didn't talk about it during the campaign. They didn't mention it at all, and there's no mention of the convention, which was also passed by their, and it was even in the plan for government in 2020 that there's going to be an independence convention, etc. So it's all been put to one side, etc. So what we are looking to do is step away from our thoughts of the past, discuss with neutral organisations, what do you need to take part? They told us, so we came up with this concept and we looked a step back and we went, you know what, that's way better. That's way better. Right. And it's not just, we also want other governments around the world, if we're doing this and it's government funded and it's funded by the Scottish government, then the Citizens' Convention has the right to go to other governments and say, tell us what your best practices are on land reform, on taxation, on avoiding tax avoidance, on stop avoiding tax avoidance is a good thing, I think, but stopping tax avoidance, on rural development, on maintaining rural communities, etc. Tell us everything you have done, and we've got a smorgasbord from around the world. And I think the rest of the world's going to go, this is a really interesting project. I think other international countries, governments are going to look at us and go, we should watch this because we might learn an awful lot from this. And also, if Scotland is becoming an independent country, then these people have started engaging with the convention and engaging with Scotland and actually see Scotland as an emerging new nation with some brilliant ideas. And we'll merge those with the hopes and dreams of the Scottish people, but also the best practices from within Scotland and the ideas from within Scotland, because Scotland's full of leading thinkers and experts that nobody listens to. Nobody pays any heed to. We have international experts brought in to answer questions, and quite often the world's leading experts are sitting in universities or in think tanks, etc. here going, how come nobody asked me? We want to be an independent country, but we don't actually pay heed to our own experts.
When we were looking at the principles that the original Citizens' Assembly had come out with, they were all, and I think they'd been given this remit, but they were all to do with devolved areas. There was no opinions about nuclear power, about energy, any of the big things that really are affecting people's lives. Yeah,
it wasn't allowed to. And also, or encouraged to, and it also was badly damaged by COVID because it had to move online, etc. So there are issues there. However, I do think that we're not reinventing the wheel with this proposal. And again, it's a proposal. People need to come. People need to come and look at this proposal, and instead of saying, "Oh, I didn't understand this about it, and I didn't understand that about it," why don't they come and say, I like this. It's a good starting point. Here's how I would improve it, because that's the whole purpose of putting it out there, so people can give us better ideas. We're not precious about anything, you know. So, but also we're not reinventing the wheel, because there are people, there are organisations and within the independence movement as well who have done great work. The Wellbeing Alliance, etc., Carnegie, you know, Action on Poverty, etc. Let's get these organisations together and actually have them put their thinking into the mix, so as we can run it past the Scottish people and see, okay, does this fit? Is this part of the smorgasbord that we want to choose from? But within the independence movement, there are people who've done that too, who've done a lot of work. Some good, some not so good. But this will give them all a voice, not reinventing the wheel, and the Citizens Assembly stuff will plug right in as well.
I hadn't quite taken on board the what you just said about you know, going to other countries and saying to them, what have you got in place for land reform? I mean, you know, well, I don't think any country's got the difficulties we have in terms of the small amount of people who own a large amount of land. But you know, Norway's, you know, yeah, I mean, you know, we all know from Leslie Riddoch's kind of work, we know that what happens in Norway. So I hadn't quite taken that on board. But you see, that again, I just quite excited hearing that, and it's partly because I'm interested in it, of course, but it's also because I think, wow. So then you've got a subcommittee or a group of people who are part and parcel of this convention, and they go off, do a few visits, and yes, they will have experts there, because you wouldn't you? You might have a couple of academics.
Get the experts from all over the world to actually zoom in, and we'll televise that, and we'll put it on our own website so as people can see the evidence, but it's totally open.
But that would just be brilliant, wouldn't it? A friend of mine, his grandfather was one of the guys up in Lewis who, you know, claimed the land. They just went out and claimed land. So about 100 years back, he's living on the croft that his grandfather gained out of that. Well, it was a bit of a local rebellion against the local landowners. So you could have people like that in it. That would just be wonderful. And it means you'd get good information, but you'd also get people's stories. And I know you think a lot about how the importance of getting stories into it. So, wow, you know, I'm even more excited now about it.
It is about creating a story of Scotland. And what is a nation? A nation is a collection of the stories we tell about ourselves, about the songs and the poetry and the culture. And so, we're talking about writing a new story that is, you know, not science fiction, but it's talking about the next Scotland. You know, so this is who we are, and this is where we're going. And storytelling is going to be a huge part of what we do with this, if it gets funded, if it goes ahead. And I really think it will, because you're talking about land. You get global best practices from governments. You've got academic experts from around the world. You've got Land and Estate Scotland. You've got the Carbeth Hutters, all seen as equal in terms of telling their story to this convention. You know?
And you can also future-proof it as well, because the whole land is impacted by net zero, by the climate emergency. So there's the land as we understand it now, but that we can't live like that if you know the global south is going to migrate into the global north at some point.
Yes, there was a great television program. I can't remember what it was called. Might have been A Long Walk to Freedom, I don't know, but it was from the 80s, I think it was, and it was about 10 million people forming a march out of Africa because we'd ruined the environment. And I remember this television program going, that might actually happen as quite a young person. Now, it really is starting to happen, and I think we can safely assume that the environment and land reform will probably be two of the big pillars of this, of the convention. But again, I didn't want to be prescriptive and say what everything else was, because we might be surprised. There might be something that comes up that none of us have actually foreseen, because we're involved in a political environment. Well, most people ignore the political environment. They might have different agendas. And so you can't be prescriptive about this.
It could be housing or something. The housing, I think, is huge.
Issue,
especially for young people.
It's very easy to immediately start thinking about the big estates. I mean, I just did that a couple of minutes back. But, you know, living in Glasgow, you easily see bits of Glasgow that have lain unused, getting worse. And the one I'm thinking about is the Govan Graving Docks, which is owned by a development company, and they're letting it go to rack and ruin.
Manchester-based port company.
Yes, that's right.
Who didn't develop Glasgow because they didn't want to compete with the Manchester and Liverpool developments.
Yeah.
Exactly. Land reform could be a big issue. But also I think one of the key things that we've got to understand about this. So we have spent, I couldn't really put a number on it, but more than several tens of thousands of pounds over the last few years doing research, polling, etc., on the values of the Scottish people and understanding that. And that's where the wellbeing pension came from.
Oh, yes.
Which has now been adopted as Scottish government policy. And so basically, Believe in Scotland has research that tells us we think what we know. We think we know the issues that will come up. We think we know what will be said and what will be asked by the Scottish people. We might be surprised, but we've got a really good handle on it. And that's why we believe that it will result in an independence recommendation, not from the convention, but from the people. It'll become obvious. And when it becomes obvious that the hopes and dreams, for a better Scotland can't be delivered through anything else other than independence, then independence is won, right? But if you're right now staying on the political route to independence, the SNP government in Scotland and the SNP party has to attack Westminster. It has to attack Labour for its ridiculous, keeping the 2-child cap and the
winter fuel thing.
I'm sorry, but that is ridiculous. They deserve everything they've got. But a third of the yes vote that we need are Labour voters. And so now the Party of Independence is going to war with the Labour government, right? 51% of people in a poll that we did who said they were going to vote Labour in the next general election, which is the one just gone, 51% of them supported independence if it was based on the idea of moving to a wellbeing economy and introducing a wellbeing pension. 51%, right? And so, well, guess what? If you're going into a general election, you maybe should talk about independence a bit more if you don't want to stop those people going back to Labour. So we've got a fair idea as to what this convention is going to talk about. And I believe in Scotland, I believe in the people of Scotland, I believe that their values are different from neoliberal, big corporate-led Westminster government. I believe that Starmer doesn't excite a single person up here. I believe that all that people voted for was to get rid of the Tories, and it was nothing to do with independence, because independence wasn't as exciting enough a story in that general election, and we want to make it an exciting story, just like it was in 2014. We want to get away from the politics and get the yes movement family feeling that we had back then.
Yeah, that's the other thing with a general election. We don't have the power to do anything in that sphere. And that's where, what you just said, the people have the power to decide what kind of country we want to live in just every day of our lives. But sending people who we've now got, 9? I mean, they couldn't have done anything with all 59 had been banging the drum. So 9 certainly aren't even going to be registered. What kind of response have you had from the Holyrood regime? Because if we're relying on them to fund it and approve it and approve trustees, have they responded at all?
So basically, we've put the proposal out. We're actually sending it, I believe, to all pro-independence MPs and MSPs this week. I've had a meeting where it was discussed initially, and I won't say what was discussed, but it was initially discussed with the Deputy FM, Kate Forbes, and next week I've got a meeting with the First Minister where not just myself but others from Believe in Scotland, so there's usually 2 or 3 of us going across, because I don't just go myself, I take people from the independence movement with me to these meetings, and we will discuss it with John Swinney. I wouldn't expect an instant response. What I would expect is for them to consider it. And my challenge to the politicians is, okay, there is a gaping hole in our plan to move independence forward. You've just seen the consequences of going to an election with a gaping hole in that plan. Here's what we think the answer is. Either get on board with this or come up with something better. And if they come up with something better, we'll go, we were wrong, put it to one side. That's better, right? I hope they do. I hope they come up with something better. We've just spent so long working on this, and by we, I mean dozens and dozens of people and taken, you know, the opinions of experts, etc. And we can't think of a better way to do this.
Yeah.
And I think, and then some people go, oh, but an independence convention, you're backing down and just making it a devolution convention. You know, we hear that sort of stuff. You made the point before, we don't have the power to do things. And the issue is that the Scottish Parliament doesn't actually necessarily have the power to fund independence convention. And so basically, if we don't make this an open and inclusive, all options considered convention, then A, it won't have the credibility because Civic Scotland can't join because some of the members don't support independence, so they won't join an independence convention, right? And B, well, the very next step is you're heading to the Supreme Court.
Yes.
Whether or not you can fund it. And if the Supreme Court decides in 8 months' time you can, great. Well, the opportunity is gone. We've waited 8 months. But if you lose and you've spent the $2.5 million you could have spent in the convention losing a battle in the Supreme Court, because the battle in the Supreme Court is not about the claim of right. You know, I totally back that. Scotland is a nation where the sovereignty rests with the people. Yeah. But first you've got to prove that you've got the right to implement the claim of right. It has to be the settled will of the Scottish people. And so what we're doing is, let's not go to court and start battling over hypotheticals, which courts won't hear anyway. That's already happened. Let's actually have a mechanism to actually get the hopes and dreams and aspirations for a better Scotland of the Scottish people written down, all agreed to, challenge the union to deliver against it. They can't and they don't want to. Challenge devolution to deliver against it. It can't, it doesn't have enough powers. Challenge Devo Max, which might be promised, to deliver against it. Well, Devo Max doesn't include getting rid of nuclear weapons. Devo Max doesn't include control of pensions. Devo Max doesn't control benefits, the 2-child cap. It doesn't control rejoining the EU because international relations isn't part of Devo Max. I don't believe there's any way to actually build a better country without the powers of independence, but the Scottish people don't know that. So let's have this conversation and let's show that is the only way to do it and let them choose. It is fully democratic.
It might be that one of your trustees is Gordon Brown, for example.
I doubt it, but I see where you're going with this.
But really, you know, that I suppose is the other.
Is he a big deal I would go for instead? Maybe is a possibility.
Would be good. Or David Martin, who did the Citizens' Assembly, he would be quite good. But I mean, that I think is the first, who those trustees are sends a huge message about the values of this process.
I thought. I mean, I thought that as well. That whoever the main, I don't know. Well, we don't know how it will be organised, but say there's 2 or 3 people who are co-conveners or something. I mean, I thought to myself, so what if Scottish Labour go, oh, that's a good idea. We want Gordon Brown to be involved in it, and I voted for Gordon Brown for a long time. So you know, a bit of me goes, well, you know, the man's ethical. He's, you know, tells the truth about things. He doesn't want Scotland to be independent, but that's not what this is about. So I ended up thinking, if Scottish Labour and Gordon Brown were to say that, and he was up for it, as long as he's working within the framework that you've set out, that actually would be all right. And then I thought, well, we could maybe have one of these co-conveners might be someone from Church of Scotland. So, you know, I'm not a Christian, but there was someone who occurred to me, a former moderator of the Church of Scotland, and I thought, well, I wouldn't mind if they were that, because again, you know, it's like, you know, in some ways, Church of Scotland's part of Scotland's DNA. You know, whether you're a Christian or not, you know, Church of Scotland are generally trying to do good, and they've got a grassroots organisation. They're in touch with people, so those would be fine actually, as long as the remit for it and the framework for it is really clear. And I think that's one of the big pluses and you know, and what you've come up with. It's not about the Constitution; it's about Scotland.
Somebody like Kathleen Jamie, the Macher, you know, completely different perspective on things. That I think she'd be great, and she could do you free poems, man.
Yes.
Never a bad thing.
Never a bad thing.
So the thing is, as we have designed this, it is going to be completely inclusive. Everybody who wants to be part of it can be part of it. And if you don't want to be part of it, you've got to say why.
Yeah.
And if it's developing along lines I think it will develop, where it becomes just a really exciting new story that's engaging, that people are joining in with and actually going, yeah, this is actually a great exercise, you're going to look stupid if you're not part of it. And so basically the first challenge is, will you take part? Because I, as an independence campaigner, I'm willing to stand in front of the floodgates of ideas that this convention will open, and I'm willing to say, I believe that I am going to benefit from this and not be washed away by it. And if they think that they're going to be washed away by it, then they have admitted defeat before they've even started.
Yes.
And let's be absolutely clear here. The reason it's not political, and the reason it's not about it's not about the Constitution per se, because that would be challenged in court, but also it would be divisive and tribalist, right?
Yes.
So Scotland is divided along the constitutional lines without a doubt. Regardless of how the vote just went in the general election, independence, I hope, still remains at 50-50. We'll wait and see what the next poll says. It might dip a few percent, but it'll go back up anyway. But if we take all of that out and we actually just say, okay, what do the Scottish people want? Then that's got to be a good thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
If we can tell a better story about Scotland. And then the political parties, basically we're starting a quality auction. We're saying, going to the next Holyrood, your manifesto should say how you deliver against this. And all of those manifestos will have massive holes in them if this brings out independence only, things that are deliverable only by independence.
Yeah.
And therefore, it is a huge, huge challenge to them. But nobody can get on board with this and then say, right, I'm going to stop it doing something, because it's going to be a tsunami of stories and ideas and voices from around Scotland. We just it's the convention of truth, right? We're all going to find out whether or not we have judged the Scottish people properly. I'm up for that.
Yeah.
So obviously, the whole thing will happen, and there'll be a written and hopefully audio-visual kind of presentations that will come out of it. Fantastic. But it says at some point that the convention would itself be able to say the best way to implement these would be through independence. And I was a bit surprised. I'm paraphrasing there. I might not have got it exactly right, but
yeah, I think that's a paraphrasing, because what I'm saying is it's actually that the convention should put the report out, and the convention should say, this is what the plan for a better Scotland is, right? We're going to create a better Scotland, and this is how it needs to happen, right? It's then down to the Scottish independence political parties and the Scottish independence movement to point out whether or not that can or cannot be delivered, and then we put it to test in the election, right? I'm of a mind that if at the end of the process, the Board of Trustees, whatever the setup is, that's what I've imagined, a Board of Trustees says, I think it's incumbent upon us to actually say one way or the other, then that's fine. But that'll be down to them. I can't tell them whether or not. But if they go, let's just put this report out and not say anything about the Constitution, I'm also fine with that, because it's not the convention's job to discuss the Constitution. It's the convention's job to discuss the hopes and dreams of the people of Scotland.
This is a sort of 3-step process then, and the bit that we're kind of focusing on right now is that conversation. What is it that we want? And I think the bit for me where it starts to get a little bit vaguer is, how does it then tip over into, so here's what we think the answers are? Because I think it's a very different thing asking a group of people what they want to asking, well, how do you achieve that then, without it tipping into the political debate? Do you see that as a problem?
Yeah, like I say, I don't see the convention actually asking, okay, how is this delivered, right? I don't see that.
Right, okay,
as
then I've misunderstood that.
Right, so I will look again and see how clear that is.
I've got it in front of me at the moment, and it does say the Scottish Citizens Convention ought to be legally allowed to have the option. Ought to be, but it won't be. Yeah, so therefore we're not considering it. Okay, well, it just goes on to say the option to consider opportunities for implementation against the constitutional options available to Scotland. And then it goes, ought to be, fair enough, allowed to make recommendations accordingly in its final report. And then the next paragraph? Well, the rest of that sentence is considering the constitutional implications of the plan for a better Scotland. Is that not muddying the waters about it?
No, what I'm saying is that it ought to be able to do that. I think in the next paragraph I point out we don't think it will be allowed to.
I haven't got the other paragraph written down in front of me, so that was what jumped out at me. So good to make that clear, I think.
Page 5, it says that they're there to solve the problems as well, identifying solutions and solving them. And I think that, that's also slightly muddying, how far does this...
It's an interesting point, because you're thinking if it comes up with a solution and that solution can only be implemented through independence, there is no such thing as a solution that cannot be put in place in the union, right? The union can decide to get rid of nuclear weapons. The union can decide to set up a fund. So coming up with solutions is different to considering the constitutional implications of those solutions. So, for instance, if we come up with a plan that says we think we should double the pension, right, which should make it a European average pension, right, then the solution is to double the pension. And then we say, okay, Holyrood, can you double the pension? No, it's not one of our powers. With Devo Max and federalism, not one of our powers. That would still be retained by Westminster. Okay, Westminster, will you double the pension? No. Right, so so that's not a constitutional issue.
Got it. Yeah,
that's clear.
That's fine. And it's so difficult when you've worked on something for the best part of over a year and a bit to understand how things that are crystal clear in your mind are read and understood. So I think you've made a fair point, but no, it's solutions to the problems as opposed to, and therefore the constitutional question as to whether we can implement these under certain things. That bit will not be considered, because if that is considered, then yes, unionists will go, you're just trying to set a trap.
That is the thing. If there is any even ambiguity at all, they will steam in there with that. So, if we, being on board in principle with this kind of thing, are going, what about that bit? Then perhaps that is maybe quite a good test as to where might be tapping. There was a fantastic line you came up with, though, somewhere in it, where you said the bit that Westminster is blocking, that tells you what bit they're most afraid of. I thought, what fantastic observation that was.
The obstacle is the way. Yes. Essentially, what's actually happening on the constitutional question is that Westminster knows full well it does not want to end up in the Supreme Court by saying you can't have a referendum. The sovereignty sits with Westminster. It's not with the Scottish people at all. It's not saying that. They're saying now is not the time. They're saying you can at some point have a referendum, but we get to decide when, because they know full well that is not breaking the claim of right. That is not breaking the terms of union in whatever way you describe the terms of union, because it's a muddle as to what breaks it, etc. So they're very cleverly not saying no to a referendum. They're saying now is not the time. What they're trying to do then, but they cannot stop the Scottish government or the SNP or all the independence parties putting in their manifestos at this general election, at this Holyrood election, we are calling this a de facto, vote for us and we will, right? Because then you've got the majority of the people voting for you. You can then enact the claim of right, and that changes the whole situation. So what they're trying to do is, if they say yes to a referendum, then we're voting for Scotland. We're voting for Scotland's independence. We're voting for who we are as a nation. And it allows people to cross party lines. But if it's a de facto, you've got to put a tick in a box beside SNP, beside Greens, beside Alba, whatever. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Right. They're trying to make us vote for a party, not vote for a country. And so what they fear is that we're going to tell stories about who we are as a country. So what I'm doing is creating a mechanism that actually has that national conversation that would go with a referendum, create the stories as to who we are as a nation. And as soon as we understand our own story, of course we're going to reject Westminster rule.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely confident, despite the fact that this is how I think is the best route to delivering independence. I'm not entirely confident the SNP will go for it. Mm-hmm. And if they don't have an answer to how quickly can you deliver independence and what is the route to getting around these roadblocks that have been put in place, if they don't have an answer to that, they ain't going to form the Scottish government. They're going to get
that's
not wiped out because it's proportional representation, but they're going to get as big a hit.
I was going to say we could end up with Anas Sarwar being the person we're having negotiations with, which fills me with horror, I have to say.
Currently, the polls say that, yes. And there are issues because the Scottish government has ended its deal with the Greens. They've got to get a budget through early next year. And how are they going to get a budget through? They don't currently have the votes to get the budget through. So, there is a situation that, I mean, if you're the Greens and you've just been kicked out of government and the SNP come to you and say, sorry about ending the Butte House deal in the way we did, but we've got a new budget, would you mind voting for it? They're going to go, here's our wish list. And it's going to be a lot bigger and harder than it would have been if they're still in government. Can't do any of that. Let's go to Alba. Civil war within the independence movement to get the Alba vote. Basically try staying First Minister of an SNP government if you accept an Alba vote. I'm not passing any opinion on whether or not, a curse on all of their houses to the politicians for messing up our momentum as far as I'm concerned. So, I am slightly anti-politics here, but I'm just observing the situation here that we might not get to 2026 before there's another Holyrood.
So we've got the proposal, and the more I've looked at it, I mean, I had questions and things. That's really good getting some of that clarified in this conversation. As you say, that the SNP have got to go for it. I mean, presumably the Greens have to go for it in Holyrood as well to get it through. And then there's a very, very tight schedule to get that up and running and doing the job of work and coming back with something in time for a 2026 Holyrood election. I mean, if the Holyrood election was brought forward, that would kind of scupper it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, it would scupper the timescale for sure.
Yeah.
But then we'd be looking at the next general election, and you could say that gives us more time to do it properly, etc. But it is a tight timescale already. We'll be talking about 18 months of work. But because there's already been citizens' assemblies, because there's already been a lot of work done by so many different people, I don't think we're not starting from scratch here. It's not reinventing the wheel. So therefore, I think that general principles can be arrived at from autumn next year. Maybe those general principles are enough. So we talked about how the obstacle that Westminster is trying to put in our way shows us what they're trying to stop this national conversation from happening. Therefore, we should try and make this national conversation happen. But also, what it tells us is that they think that the longer they delay, the less ability we will have to deliver a proper independence movement and campaign. And they're right. Yeah. Look at the momentum we had in 2015, 2016, 2017, 18, 19. Yeah, it has reduced significantly. So it's working. So when somebody from an independent supporting political party says, independence is off the table for a decade, at least we don't even need to speak to it for a decade. Yeah, what you're doing is, Westminster have shown you that's what they want you to say, and you're saying what they want you to say. So say the opposite.
Yeah.
Say the opposite. Say, how can we deliver it? So as far as I'm concerned, and I'm going to be a bit controversial here, if you're a pro-independence party candidate at the next election, or even at that last election, and you thought we shouldn't have been talking about independence, then you shouldn't have been a candidate. Now, that's not to say you should just be talking about independence, because there are other candidates out there who are talking about nothing but independence, who have no credible route to independence. Therefore, that wasn't helpful either. So let's get a credible route to independence. Let's understand what the people want, and let's figure out how independence delivers against their needs. I was having a debate in 2014, and I talked about the national conversation that was happening and how we needed to capture the hopes and dreams. So I'm repeating what I said in 2014, to a certain extent. And my unionist opponent said, Gordon thinks we can base the future of Scotland on the hopes and dreams of 5 million people. And I just turned to him and I went, well, what else would you base it on?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line, isn't it?
Yeah, that's my whole point. That's what I believe independence will become.
Yeah,
that's great. And I mean, let's hope, fingers crossed, and with your persuasive abilities, Gordon, that SNP and Holyrood and the Greens also, can get behind this. I mean, the SNP already were behind having a more of a, that other kind of constitution, the independence one. So presumably it's not too much of a shift to move over to this, which is
the party membership certainly is, I believe.
Yes. Yeah. Hopefully that will happen, and this whole proposal will get underway. Gordon, I think you were wanting to tell us about a few other things that are going to be coming up in the next few weeks, months.
Absolutely. So basically, if people want a copy of the convention paper to read it, or if they just want to read the blog about it and the executive summary, which is really quick, you don't need to read the whole 50 pages, just go to our website and they can register there to become a subscriber member of Believe in Scotland as well, and get updates as to what we're doing.
We'll put the link at the bottom in the notes to this podcast as well, so they can click straight onto it. There's
also an opportunity for people to become what's known as a stakeholder member, and a stakeholder member is a monthly donation of £5 or more. Our stakeholder membership has almost doubled since the general election. These offices are free, paid for by Business for Scotland donors, but every penny that we get in through our stakeholder memberships goes to campaigning for independence, materials, online activities, these sort of things. Yeah, we've got coming up Inverness Day of Action. We're going up to Inverness. We're doing stalls, a mass leaflet drop. On average, we're getting 50 people turning up to deliver leaflets with us, etc. We're also Inverness do a sort of Bridges for Indy as well. After we've done our leaflets, we're going to go and join them on that. So basically, we as an organisation take our campaign to towns, and we bring people from all across Scotland, and it's a great fun. It's a good day. There's usually music and singing and just meeting people in the streets. We're getting fantastic responses. People come up to us and they say, "Oh, is this SMB? Is this?" We go, "No, we're just people who believe in Scotland," and the conversation changes dramatically, and we get great responses when we talk about independence. "Oh, I didn't know that's what it was all about." So it's just one of those days. Good day. And that's on Saturday, August the 17th, 10:45 meet. Details on the website. Then we've got the Scottish Independence Congress on Wednesday, the 21st of August. That's us bringing together 142 Yes groups that are affiliated. But I wanted to point out that our Congress is open to all Yes groups, affiliated or otherwise, to join in and even vote, not just for our own affiliated organisations. That'll be a Zoom on Wednesday, the 21st. And then on Wednesday, the 18th of September, we're marking the 10th anniversary with a rally at Holyrood. And you might say, is this a celebration of... No, it's not. It's not a wake either. What we're doing is we're marking the date, because you can bet the unionist media is going to mark the date. And they're going to say, so it was 10 years ago and it doesn't look like it's going to be happening anytime soon. And then we want people to turn up. We're going to put on a show, get some great speakers. We're going to light up buildings. We're going to put billboards up, and we're going to make a narrative that says, sorry, but we're not going away, and we are going to win, and we're not going to let them put us down on that date. So that's an important date for people to join in.
Brilliant. Yeah.
We'll come and we'll film that, won't we, Marlene? Is it an all-day thing, or
No, it'll start at 7:00 at night outside the Parliament, so people will have time to finish work and get there, have dinner if you're in Edinburgh, or jump on a train if you're not. Now, we're not saying this is a mass rally. This is a midweek mark the date event. We hope there's a good turnout, but we're not thinking gigantic full Edinburgh, etc. What we are thinking is that we need to mark the date with a good quality event and actually talk about how we reboot our campaign and move on to independence.
Yeah, fab. Okay. We'll put those in the notes as well, those dates. Plenty going on. Smashing.
Absolutely.
Thank you as always. It's always a pleasure to chat to you, Gordon.
Always a pleasure to be here, and your questions have improved our thinking on the convention. So the more questions welcome. You get, the stronger the idea gets. So that's been good. That's good. Always a pleasure to come on a show and have a chat, because it is the show where you get the most in-depth questions and the most interest in what people are doing, and good challenges are all incredibly positive. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Oh, that's great.
Thank you.
Good, glad to have you.
And thanks to everybody for listening. This is the second in our series on our national conversation. You can watch the video version on our YouTube channel, and we'll be back again next week. Bye for now.